Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's Carol at Big Cat Rescue.
She fed her husband to the tigers.
There's no way that I can finally say, see, I didn't do it.
Dig up that septic tank. I promise you he's underneath that damn thing.
It's like, I couldn't have run his hands through the grinder, much less a body.
There was no way she had any involvement in Don's disappearance.
But it's not accurate.
Hi my angels, it's Hailey Reese and I hope that you guys are having a fantastic morning, afternoon, night, whatever it is for you. When today's video finally reaches you, you guys, today's video has been so highly requested by so many of you ever since the 7-part Netflix docuseries Tiger King released last month. And to be honest with you guys, I was late to the Tiger King bandwagon. I saw everybody talking about it for weeks before I decided to finally watch it for myself. And in doing so, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. I felt horrible for the animals. Then I felt confused by everything going on. And then I felt overwhelmed by everything going on. But most of all, I felt like drawn in by everything going on. I'm sure by now, if you guys have been on social media, you've heard something or another about Tiger King. I feel like every single time I've went on to Instagram, Twitter, and especially TikTok lately, there's memes, there's videos, there's conspiracies, there's talk about Joe Exotic, Carole Baskin, and the Tiger King docuseries as a whole. Essentially, Tiger King follows the life of Joe Exotic and other big cat conservationists, including Carole Baskin, his obvious enemy. Now, during this series, Joe Baskin continuously touches on the fact that Carole's husband has disappeared without a trace, and what he thinks happened to Carole Baskin's husband was not made a secret to any of us. It was made very obvious that Joe Exotic believes that Carole Baskin is responsible for the death of her husband and believes that he is not missing. That in fact, Carole Baskin murdered her husband and fed him to her tigers. And since that theory, plenty of people all over social media have taken to the big question. Did Carole Baskin kill her husband, or is he really missing? There's been a lot of talk about it. A lot of big celebrities have been discussing this as well. And a lot of people seem to be leaning towards the fact that they think Carole Baskin isn't so innocent in the disappearance of her husband. So that is what we're going to be diving into today. We're going to dive into Carole Baskin, her relationship with her husband, the disappearance of her husband, and then we're going to dive into what you guys think, what I think, just what's been going on since after the release of Tiger King for those involved. And I just want to know what you guys think. By the end of this, do you think Carole Baskin killed her husband? Now, I should note before getting into today's video that since the release of Tiger King, there have been plenty of videos, articles, new websites launching from Carole Baskin and her husband, Howard Baskin, who are both seemingly appalled by the narrative within the Netflix series and are heartbroken over Carole's portrayal. We'll get into that later in today's video, but I do want to note that they both feel incredibly betrayed by the portrayal of them both, especially Carole in this docuseries, as they were under the impression that this docuseries was solely to shed light on the exploitation of big cats. They were also seemingly told from their perspective, from their words, I don't know this for certain, that Joe Exotic would be a part of the docuseries but was not the main focus of it. So they feel incredibly betrayed, they feel hurt, and they are incredibly appalled by the portrayal of Carole in this series. So I do want you guys to note that they're not happy with this conversation even being a conversation, and they think that that was just ridiculous, that this is even how it turned out to be. But without further ado, let's get into this whole case. So overall, the unsolved mystery of Carole Baskin's missing husband, Jack Don Lewis, lingers on after the conclusion of the 7-part documentary series Tiger King. Now, Don, a self-made millionaire, vanished into thin air after altering his will to give Carole his property rights in the case of his disappearance. Don and Carole first met when they were actually both in unhappy marriages. During a particularly bad night, Carole ran away from her first husband. She was walking beside the road when a good Samaritan, Don, pulled over to ask if she needed help. The two lovers left their respective partners in 1991 and bought their first bobcat. Then they began breeding big cats and made a sizable 40-acre sanctuary their home. Within a few years, over 100 cats roamed their wildlife on Easy Street property. The couple would soon clash on certain things to do with their business, however, because Don wanted to breed, sell, and profit off of their cats, and Carole felt as though this was immoral, which makes a lot of sense because that was one of her biggest arguments against Joe Exotic. She was very in favor of not breeding and selling cats for profit. In Carole's diary, she actually referred to her husband as venomous, and their fights over their treatment of their animals and money began to grow, and Carole kind of felt her control over Easy Street slipping away from her. What's really strange is that in June of 1997, Don filed for a restraining order against Carole and told police that she had threatened to shoot him if he didn't leave. The petition was actually rejected due to free speech. However, Don gave a copy to his secretary should anything happen to him, and it was made very clear that he had intentions of divorcing Carole. Only a few weeks later, on August 18th of 1997, Don would disappear, and the last person to see him alive would be Carole. Carole claimed that he'd gotten up early one morning and was heading to Miami, but after not hearing from him for 24 hours, on August 19th, 1997, she reported him missing. In the months leading up to his disappearance, Don made it clear he was interested in moving to Costa Rica. It's said by Carole that he was always flying on a regular basis because he had a sex addiction. Carole wrote, "Don had told me about going to Costa Rica and disappearing. Our Costa Rican attorney, Roger Peterson, said the Helicopter brothers were the local version of the mafia, and Don was loaning them money." But here's where the most distressing piece of evidence comes in as far as this particular case is concerned, and that is that Don's will was altered prior to his disappearance. It stated that his property rights should all go to Carole in the instance of his disappearance, which plenty of people have deemed to be unusual. I mean, if I'm crafting up a will, more often than not, you're going to create a will based on the premise of you passing away or something of that nature, not based off of you disappearing. While it was noted that the will was very suspicious in the fact that it had a specific detail of shall he disappear, and he had therefore wound up disappearing, there was no further evidence to indicate that it had been falsified. So there was no way to prove that there was any malicious intent or doings behind it. Then Carole explained the will. "That is why I included disappearance as an event that would activate the power of attorney. I am sure Attorney Joe Fritz is correct that this is unusual. It made perfect sense in the situation given what I was told by Don and by Peterson about Costa Rica and Don's dealings there at the time. Ultimately, Carole underlined that she never threatened him and certainly had nothing to do with his disappearance. It's also very important to note that Carole wholeheartedly cooperated with law enforcement amidst her husband's disappearance in 1997. She was very cooperative. While the police did eventually head to Costa Rica in order to determine his whereabouts, there was no evidence that Don had ever even went to Costa Rica, nor any evidence that he'd taken off in a plane to Costa Rica either. Although Carole thought that if he had done so, perhaps he'd have went under the radar to disappear slyly. Carole hired a private investigator and the police continued their investigation, but there was no substantial leads and there was no evidence of anything sinister, malicious, or horrific having taken place. There was no evidence that this had been a murder rather than just a disappearance. But the idea of a secret escape really bothered others that were very close to Don, who claimed he wouldn't have done such a thing. It didn't take long for those close to Don or his family to start accusing Carole of killing him. A lot of them claimed that Carole could easily feed his body, ground up to the tigers, without a shred of physical remaining evidence. Although I should note that it was said by law enforcement that the meat grinders that were claimed to have been used were removed weeks prior to Don's disappearance. The sheriffs also claimed that the septic tank that was referenced in correlation to Carole Baskin and the disappearance of her husband were installed years after the disappearance of her husband, so they're irrelevant to this case. So the septic tank that you guys heard about in the documentary, according to law enforcement, was installed years later, and it is completely irrelevant to any evidence in this case.
Dig up that septic tank. I promise you he's underneath that damn thing.
Nonetheless, police never named Carole as a suspect, and while his family refrained from getting embroiled in a financially draining legal battle with Carole, Joe Exotic remained undeterred from doing so. Joe would continually imply that Carole had in fact killed her husband, even making a whole entire music video called Here Kitty Kitty with a Carole Baskin lookalike feeding her husband to the tiger. Oh, and the whole entire song is about the fact that Carole killed her husband, fed him to the tigers, all of that shebang. It's still on YouTube if you guys want to watch it, although it's came out that Joe is not the singer of the song. To be clear though, there is no substantial evidence against Carole Baskin to support the fact that people think she did kill her husband. There's been no evidence, and the police have not, like I said, listed her as a suspect or pressed any charges against her. But there's a lot of people who, especially in this docuseries, analyze Carole's behaviors and feel as though there's something not right with her demeanor towards the disappearance of her husband.
Came like this wholly exciting thing that I ran him through that grinder, and it's like, I couldn't have run his hands through the grinder, much less a body.
Proceeding to lay out her side of the story, Carole said that Don's behavior was gradually showing signs of mental deterioration in the years before his disappearance, claiming that he'd visited a number of doctors and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
He was acting so irrationally, and I was trying desperately to get him medical help. Instead, Ann McQueen, who you saw in the film, and his friend, Wendell Williams, were telling him that I was trying to have him committed to take his money away from him, which just terrified him. I knew there was something going on with him. He just wasn't right. He was going and getting in, he did this all the time. He would crawl into dumpsters and bring home all kinds of garbage. Everybody knew, don't eat anything Don brings you, because he got it out of a dumpster somewhere. But he would call me and he would be crying because he couldn't remember where he was, and he'd be stuck in a dumpster and not able to get out because he didn't have enough stuff to get himself piled up in the corner to get back out of the dumpster. And I'd be driving all around town trying to figure out which one of his favorite dumpsters he had managed to get himself into.
Joe Fitz, Don's prior attorney, claims that Carole Baskin's claims about this are utterly baseless. He claims that Don knew exactly what he was doing and Carole's lying about it all. A former associate of Don, Wendell Williams, went as far as to say that the mental deterioration claims were all bull, and he accused Carole of setting the stage for dementia and Alzheimer's so his disappearance will be left unquestioned. In the docuseries Tiger King, there's a lot of allegations that these documents have been forged, or that Carole had tampered with or messed with the documents, although I should note that there has been no actual evidence of her having done so. The case has never been officially closed, but the last substantial thing to have taken place was back in 2011 when Carole Baskin declined to take a polygraph.
And so they, and I say they meaning Ann and the daughters, had said that they had gone down and taken a polygraph test, and they asked me if I would do the same. And I said, sure, because I knew that she was lying to the kids, and I wanted them to know that there was no way that I was involved in harming their father. And so I thought a polygraph would be a great way to do that. And at that time, I only had a real estate attorney. I didn't have a criminal attorney because I didn't think I had any reason to need one. And so I told my real estate attorney that I was going to go down and take this polygraph, and they said I should contact a criminal attorney and ask them for their advice. So I did, and I contacted Ron Cacciatore, and he said absolutely not. He said that whenever they give you a polygraph test, the only thing that it can do is tell whether or not you're having an emotional response. Well, for crying out loud, I was having all kinds of emotions going on. And so if you have an emotional response, they'll say you failed the polygraph, which then makes everybody think that I've done something horrible. And that was not my intent. My intent was to give them some peace of mind. And so he said, even if I were to pass the polygraph and not be emotional about the thought that my husband, my person that I had loved since I was 19 years old, has gone missing and I can't find him, if there's any way I can not be emotional about that, then what the police would say is that it was inconclusive. And by inconclusive, that would be taken to say that I'm this stone cold killer that has no emotional response.
The sheriffs say that they still have it listed as a missing persons case, as they have no substantial evidence, and actually no evidence at all, to lean towards the fact that he was killed. Carole Baskin, however, feels as though there's been no closure. She encourages people to think about the fact, what if it had been them? What if you were being accused of having killed somebody that you didn't kill and there was no evidence leaning either direction? And then she goes as far as to say that without a body, she can't prove that she is in fact innocent. Following the release of Tiger King, the Florida sheriff claims that they've had so many tips a day claiming that they have leads and that Carole Baskin is responsible and that people are really like hammering in hard to say that she did it. But like I said, you guys, there is no evidence. Although I have seen plenty of videos of behavior specialists and people who are able to read the body language of people who have claimed that Carole Baskin's body language is just not right for somebody whose husband would be genuinely missing. Now, Carole has publicly criticized the show's handling of this aspect on the story in a lengthy post. And you guys, she goes into so many different categories of videos and posts and all of that. I will link it below if you're interested in reading it. Carole Baskin's husband has also released around a 10-minute YouTube video just in her defense, saying how she's the most incredible, loving woman he knows. If anybody spent an hour with her, they'd know that she had nothing to do with it, that the two of them have actually never even had like a heated argument or said anything that they didn't mean, and that they would have never went on board with this docuseries if they were actually kept in the light of what was truly being portrayed. They were under the impression that this was to bring light to, you know, the extortion of big cats and to really just like show how dark the industry of that can be. And just overall, they were under the impression, from what he says, that they were going to be a part of an impactful docuseries in the saving of these exotic cats. And that they were also told that while Joe Exotic would be a part of this, he was not the main role of it. And that they would have never participated if they weren't blindsided. And basically in his, not his words, but in his overall summary from what I gathered from it, if they hadn't been manipulated into having done this docuseries.
Some of you have had a chance to spend time with Carole in person. Anyone who spends an hour with Carole would come away knowing that there was no way she had any involvement in Don's disappearance. In 15 years of living together, we have never had an argument. We have never even had a harsh word where the other one had to come back later and say, "I'm sorry I said that." I honestly believe that I am the luckiest man in the world. I cannot imagine having a more considerate or caring spouse. We also believed them when they insisted that while Joe Exotic would be in it as one of the characters, he would not be the focus.
You guys, I have so many mixed feelings about this entire docuseries as a whole. I can say for me personally that if Tyler had disappeared, number one, I'd be heartbroken, but number two, if I was even being remotely blamed for grinding him up and feeding him to my exotic cats, I wouldn't find it funny in the slightest. I wouldn't make light of it. I wouldn't laugh at it. I wouldn't make jokes about it. I would be so appalled and disgusted and heartbroken over that accusation that I would seriously just have done something about it. I wouldn't have reacted in the way that Carole Baskin has. And I have watched those body language analysis and I'm just like, there's something not right here. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair to say that she, guys, I don't know. Overall, it's been around 23 years and Don Lewis is still missing. The last person to have ever seen him alive is Carole Baskin, and nobody knows what has happened to him to date. I want to know what you guys think of this case, you guys. I'm so torn. On one token, I'm like, I can't even fathom being accused of murder if you really didn't murder somebody. Like, that's my biggest fear, would be like being so strongly accused of something so horrific and evil and it's not true. But on the same token, her body language is very strange. This whole docu-series is just crazy. It took me from like here to here, like it's crazy. So I want to know in the comments below, based off everything I've shared with you guys today, all the videos I've included, what do you guys think of this case? Do you think Carole Baskin killed her husband and fed him to the tigers, or do you think he genuinely did go missing? Let me know in the comments below. And that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for requesting this. I always love looking into things that are just like, you don't know which way it goes, and you kind of have to remain like neutral to cover everything. So I want to know your guys' theories and thoughts down below. Did you guys enjoy watching Tiger King? It was definitely entertaining, but a lot of aspects of it really broke my heart and were hard for me to watch. So I want to know your guys' theories down below, and that is it for today's video. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my videos, I would really love it if you guys would go ahead and click that subscribe button, and please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness, and until next time, I love you.